Okay. Sometimes the color is shifted, so like the yellow may be on the side or the bottom or whatever. It might be backwards sometimes. That's very rarely I've seen that. But generally it follows this kind of shape, right? Most of the warmer, what we consider warmer colors are together. Most of the colder colors are together as well. You can kind of see a shift here. Yellow, orange, red. Basically, if you think anything that looks like a fire, that would be closer to warm. Anything if you think about like nighttime, a dark forest, like a cave, all those kind of colors, they're shifted down to the bottom where there's colder colors. Again, like I said, sometimes this is shifted that way, it's rotated a bit, but generally the colors follow the same spectrum. We talked about this RGB thing, so this is how pixels work with us. There's a bit of theory here, you don't need to know that much, but the way we are creating art for, we're creating art for screens. Screens use RGB pixels. That's why every time there's a color mode or anything that's asking for color, it's always RGB. RGB together, like maximum red, green, and blue, they're the primary colors. The mixes of them make white with light specifically. And then you can see like if you get R and B mix, you get this like purple color. It's magenta technically. Print will be the opposite. It's not the opposite, but it's different. So cyan, magenta, yellow, CMY, and then K is key. Key is black. All right, so the intersection of them makes the black. If you can kind of notice, the intersection of colors is CMY, and the intersection of colors here is RGB. All right, so it's kind of like almost opposite of the way that they work to each other, but it just goes with the way light works. So RGB is light emitting diodes, and paint is like light reflecting. Okay, so that's why there's a difference in how they work. So again, just to remind you, in Photoshop you can get a color wheel. This is an old version of the color picker in Photoshop, but you can get a color wheel. You just need to change the setting on the color so it uses a color wheel instead. But by default, this is what you get. We talked about this last week. There's a hue. The hue is like the rainbow spectrum of colors. Again, the warmer colors, if you can kind of see, they tend to be together. They're like pushed together. Colder colors are together. And you can like change the color type. And we have brightness and saturation on the bottom. So up on the left axis, this controls brightness. This controls saturation. Saturation is the amount of color. The more saturated, the more color. The less saturated, the less color. And brightness is self-explanatory. All right. So if I showed you this, and I asked you for a temperature, what do we feel? Yeah. Okay. Why? That we have a blue tint. So there's a thing called color grading. It's not just that the assets in the scene are chosen to be like grays, blues, greens, maybe purple. There's no purples here really, but those kinds of colors. But we also have an overall thing called color grading. We'll look at that way later. That has to do with post-processing. So it's not only your assets are a certain color on the camera in the engine, which is recording. You can also add effects to that camera, so it has this kind of post-processing thing going on with it. This one is very obviously warm. Well, I would hope so. Again, if we go back to the color wheel, it literally follows those warm, cold colors. These are things we've been taught, both through art and also from real life. The fire is red and yellow, so I touch it, I get burned. I know fire is hot. And these kind of like stereotypes are used. And this one is a bit more complicated. If anyone knows the game, obviously you'll know what it is. But what color is this trying to get across? Does anyone know? What? It's cold for sure. Anything else? What? Underwater. Yeah, so this is like a teal kind of blue-green color, which is very much a shift of light underwater. I don't know if anyone's ever looked at underwater photography or something. It's one of the most difficult things to do is that you get a drop-off of light as you go deeper, but it's not a linear drop-off. So certain colors lose their kind of like strength quicker, right, the further you go down. And one of the ones that like kind of makes it to the bottom is bluey greeny, which is why a lot of photos when you see them underwater are kind of blue green. There's a reason for that. It's like yes, well, I don't know, I was going to say I'm not a physicist, but I was supposed to be a physicist. I was trained as one. I've forgotten everything. Probably, I guess. But what you need to know is, like, if you want to specifically create that kind of look, we reference a lot of the times for real world stuff. and paying attention a lot, especially to the color grading and how things appear in the setting that they're in. There's a whole thing called color gamut. We're not going to go into it. Do y'all remember that like blue, white and gold, and blue and black dress thing? Do you remember that? Okay. I got it right personally. I'm not saying I'm amazing, but just a lot of people who work with photography or work with digital painting kind of got it because they're used to seeing, oh, this is a color shift, the white balance is off. So I know with the correct white balance, this looks a certain. This should be. I think it was it white gold in the end? I can't remember. No, it was black blue, right? Yeah, I think it was. I can't remember. Um, Whereas people who are not used to that color shift confuses them. So that's kind of an example of color gamut, right? Like within a specific like color range, certain colors appear to be slightly different colors. We don't have to know the exact theory. It's good if you're interested in it, you should go look more about it. But we can do things like color grading. But what we do need to know is the way to pick like the correct colors for assets that we're going to use. There's a few other tricks that we can use as well. This is awful on here. I'm so sorry. Huh? Yeah, good idea. I don't know if that'll work. No, that's a bit better. It's a bit better. So you should be able to see this desaturation of a distance. So everything in the distance generally, for the most part, gets desaturated. So the color, remember that saturation thing I showed you, that color picker. The colors that are picked for those things that are further back are generally lower in saturation, because of atmospherics, because of distance. So atmospherics is just like dust in the air, stuff, particles in the air. So to simulate that, a lot of the time, we can either add an actual fog if you're an engine, or if you're trying to simulate that, things that are further away have less color. And then we also do things like things that are further away in daytime are lighter, things that are further away in nighttime are darker. Okay. Um, this is from Dota, but like it's used for. There's a really good art book that's online. If you just search Dota 2 art book, say what you like about the game. The art style has a really good like kind of like Bible to explain how to do things. And what it says is less is more. So generally, what people will do when they're new is they'll put too many colors in there, and they get like over carried away because you can literally put all the colors in the world. What you generally try to do is, if you're starting, try to pick three: a primary color, so the main color, secondary, and then we have a tertiary or accent color. So we look at all of these characters. Let's look at the bottom left one, the deer lady. I don't know her name. That main color is that brownie kind of shape. So most of the body is that brown color. Even the skin tone is a skin tone shift of brown. Even her hair is like kind of reddish brown. So it's all deriving from that main color. Green for the secondary color. So all the clothes are now all green. And then our accent color is used for jewels, like small details, which help to make things pop out. Another trick you may notice as well is they'll try to do, especially for characters that are really small, they'll add accent colors on like bangles or necklaces. What do you think that is for? Shape? For visual language. So from far, far away, if I have like a gold bangle, and remember it's the accent color, so it's easy to see. That gold bangle is a lot easier to see, so I know that's what the wrist is. So if it's making like an attack move or like just a general idle move, I can see because that bangle helps me to get visual acuity. This is even more important if we have a fast-paced game, especially like in first-person shooters. You'll start noticing if you go back, look at Valorant, look at Overwatch, look at I guess Team Fortress even as well. You'll notice that they have on limbs and especially on guns, on weapons, they'll have like accent colors to make it easier to see. Okay, and then we can also kind of see, again, I have no clue where these characters are from, but we can kind of see that the color choices also denote like sort of like a location area. So the bottom right one, where do we think that's from? Some icy, maybe rocky region because we've chosen like this really dark gray that's kind of rocky. And like there's, you can kind of see on his design, there's little bits of snow, like kind of frost on it as well. Frost looking things like the white, you can see. And it's kind of just light, but it's designed to look like it's a bit like frost. Um, so I was going to get to that as well, but absolutely. We also have this thing. Remember, like how stuff in the background is desaturated. which brings the foreground to the foreground, literally. We also have this saturation drop over the distance of the character. So you'll notice that everything on the face area, which is where you want to see stuff, that's usually lighter, has more saturation, and then it drops down. If you look at the bottom, this is really dark. It's almost like this bottom area is in shadow. It's quite subtle if you look at it, like just as a glance, but this one is much more obvious actually. You can see the beard is like almost like neon blue, and then down here we have almost dark blue. It's almost navy, and it's much more obvious on that one. So again, that's for visual acuity. You got to also think about how these characters are presented. This specific game, Dota, is like top down, so you kind of see the heads up first. So they're the ones that are most important. And again, we also see the arms and weapons will generally also be bright as well, because that's what's important. We need to see what they're doing. Any other questions? You good? Okay. So how do we choose a color, right? So first of all, again, you know nothing about color, I'm assuming. If you do, apologies. This is very basic stuff. But if you don't know anything about how to pick colors, these are some like tools that can help you. So first thing is it warm, is it cold? That literally just splits half of the color wheel away from you. And then once you pick a main color, let's say I'm like, I want to pick a warm character that lives in the desert. I'm probably going to be like, what is a desert color? Orangey, browny, kind of red, yellow, something like that. I'll pick that color. That will be my primary color. Then how do I pick my secondary and tertiary? These rules kind of help me. So the rules are, the first one is a complementary color. That's literally like, if I pick this color, it's whatever's opposite on the color wheel. Yeah, sorry. Is that a question? No? Okay. Whatever is opposite on the color wheel becomes the complementary color. That's very, very good for really contrasting stuff. If we look at the old kind of like old comics like Superman and Spider-Man, the really old ones, they're literally like red and blue. They're super contrasty. They're meant to like pop off the page. They're meant to be really, really bright because there wasn't that many kind of colorings. Things got washed out when they were printed. So that was a specific choice. Nowadays, we kind of complementary is quite strong, so we generally don't use it that much. We've got split complementary, which makes it a bit better. That's literally like I pick the color opposite, and I just take the two to the side of it. If that makes sense, like a little distance to the side of it, and then those colors become a split complementary. So that will mean that whatever colors are the split complementary will, I guess, like stand out quite a lot compared to my primary color, whatever my primary color was picked. Okay. Analogous colors, third one, those are colors that are right beside each other. So we go back to Dear Lady. She's quite analogous, brown, green, yellow. If we look at this color wheel, they're like close to each other. They're very close to each other in the color wheel. So analogous colors are generally for things that very much come from a single environment or a specific environment you want it to blend. Often you'll use it for NPCs. You'll use it for mobs that appear in a certain level that belong to that level. So you'll take the levels color palette and apply it to the NPCs as well, or to the mobs as well. And that will be for analogous. It is used for heroes as well, as you've seen. And then finally we have triad, which is basically if you look at the triangles here, it's everything equidistant to each other. So you just pick something that's equidistant to each other. So that seems very complicated, right? But it's not. I'll show you some tools to make it easier. So once you have those three palettes, you can mix them. You can mix and match them, and then you get like a whole range of colors. But actually, you've only started with three main colors. That means your design, whether it's a background or NPC or a character or whatever, looks contiguous, even though it may look like it has loads of different shades and loads of different hues. But really, it's built off three main colors. Again, if you know how to do color theory, you can do way more than three colors. Don't mind me, but as a beginner, this is quite easy to use. Yeah. This one? This one? So like, let's say I pick this for desert and I went here for complementary. Yeah. So I might not necessarily not use complementary. What I might use the complementary color for is, so let's say if most of my, what I would do, if I was designing a desert level, again, easily, I'd be like, okay, here's my main color. And then I'll pick like stuff around here, so most of the stuff will fit. but I'll keep the complementary for maybe like quest items or a button that needs to be pressed or something that I want the player to look at. And because I know that stands out really well to the color, I know that's going to draw players' attention. Okay, so if I want there to be like a button on the ground that I would definitely want the player to look at, I might pick a complementary color so it stands out and it's much more obvious. Yeah. Well, again, complicated stuff. If you want to do like lighting stuff, is that what you're talking about?
I'm just like talking if complementary colors can be used not directly to colors that would be environment.
Yes. Yeah, we can as well. Yeah. You can do like crazy shit with it. You can have like secondary lightings that only affect using complementary colors. There are things where there are separate lights that only affect certain items, and those might be complementary color shaded, so they show up a lot more. If you play like a shooter, there's often like this thing called Fresnel lighting. There's a outline color lighting, and sometimes those are shifted to complementary colors as well, so they show up a lot more on this specific background. But yeah, you can go crazy with it. I forgot where I was. Oh yes. So what I was also going to show you is, I hope this works still. There is this tool that's free called Peloton. Yeah, whatever. And this really helps you to generate color schemes. So you can see, like, if I drag this thing around, it gives me the mixes of the colors already. And what I can also do is, this is my analogous, right? So if we're talking about the desert scene, there's my analogous color scheme, and I can literally add complementary right here. So that's exactly the example we were talking about. I have my analogous, and I have my accent color as well, if I wanted to. And if I want this to be a triad, I can just drag these out, and that shifts how far the color palette like reaches to. And if I go all the way out here, that becomes triad. You can see it even shifted here automatically to triad. This is like an online tool, just called Peloton, and there's like a tetrad. There's like a bunch of different types, and I think you can do custom freestyle 4 colors. Yeah. Hold shift to move colors individually, so I can individually select my own colors like so. So if I want a custom build, I can as well. But it's a super easy tool to use specifically for this kind of stuff because it works based on those theories of like complementary, analogous, and so on. All good so far? Is that too much info? We good? We good? Okay, so Peloton is great. I think you can save this as well. I think you can like copy paste this image, or if you're on Windows Shift S, you can just take like a screenshot and you can copy paste that into. That will be copied. You can paste that to Photoshop, and that gives you your palette. So let's go back to this. Okay, so one thing you should never use, with some exceptions, black and white. And you should never use black and white for shading. Pure black, pure white. And the reason is pure black, pure white doesn't exist in nature. That's number one. I don't know if anyone's seen those like the Vanta black stuff, like that really black spray. That's like pure black, and it looks super weird. So it doesn't really exist in real life. Also, using pure black and pure white doesn't help if you go to 3D in the future and we're using lighting. Lighting shifts colors, right? Like, so it shifts color schemes. Or same with color grading. If I have something that's red and I put it under a blue light, that red thing may look slightly purple because now it's been shifted, correct? If I have something that's black and I put it under a red light, it's going to look just black. Again, if it's not pure black, if it's slightly reflective, it'll be shifted to like kind of a dark red thing, but I need to have that like not completely pure. Sorry, there's 2 questions. I don't know who. I'm going to go for you first.
Third point, I know a few games that use both pure black and pure white very well.
So if you're going to use the exceptions that I'm about to say, but say the exceptions and see whether they're the exceptions that I was going to say. Lambo.
And
no, I mean like what did he use it for?
Well, there's one. I looked at the game. OVIVO. It's like a game where you jump between the black and white.
Or like Downwell as well. It's like black and white.
It's a 2D game.
Yeah, it's like Downwell that uses black and white and red. So there's exceptions. If you're going for a stylistic choice of like no lighting, if you're going for a more realistic look, generally you don't do black and white. Exceptions being outlines. A lot of the time you can get away with black outlines, and you can get away with pure white highlights. So if we have something that's really shiny and you put like a little white hotspot on it, that's okay as well because that'll always be white. Anything that's meant to blend into the background, you shouldn't use black or white. Again, there's always exceptions. Sorry, is there a question? No, you can use purely saturated colors, but in general, actually, especially at the beginning, I would stay away from that because they are quite strong when you use like a pure saturated color. No, I would agree. Try not to, but again, this depends. If you're going for like a really bright game, I said Downwell. I don't know if anyone's played that. That's literally like pure black, pure white, and pure red, and that's specifically the stylistic choice they chose. But if you're going for a stylized choice like that, then yeah, of course, you do whatever you want. But generally, what we're doing, we're trying to follow like standard rules, and this is one of the standard rules. Any questions? No. Okay. So we talked about like a little bit about using the complementary possible as an indicator, but I'll show you just some examples, and you can kind of see it here. Everything's cold, blue, white, kind of grays in Portal, and anything that needs to be interacted with is straight up like the opposite of blue, right? So red, and then when it's lit up, it is lit up with like orange, yellow glow. So it's still analogous to that red color. We have this kind of like if everything is a solid color or like from one color scheme and you put something in from a different color scheme, it really stands out. That village isn't necessarily like crazy colored or anything. It's just that it's a completely different color scheme from the jungles. Well, not completely, but it's quite a shift in color from the jungle. It's quite a shift in saturation as well, so it makes it a lot more obvious. And now you don't need to use an objective marker. You can just have that, and people can see that and go, "Oh, okay, that's something that maybe I should explore." It also can inform like visual language. So if you look at if anyone's played this game, you need to basically like always get to like that little platform. And if you look at the platform, they're always like half based on the color palette of the level, but also have a like complementary color on it. Not always, but usually there is a complementary color on it. So it's visible. The middle one is the most obvious. You can see like the top red marker. It's higher saturation. This is from I think they've changed it now. This is from World of Tanks. I can't remember. What is bad about this?
It's not friendly to colorblind.
Yeah, exactly. So color blindness affects 10% of the population, and of the 10% of the population, 90% are red-green colorblind specifically. There's a shift of how strong the red-green is, but stuff that is if these two are close together in particular, there's a lot of difficulty in choosing. I don't know if anyone's colorblind. You don't have to say if you're not. But I've asked this question like a few years in a row, and there's usually someone colorblind in the class, and they would say yes, there is difficulty in differentiating between the two of these as well. So the other thing we can do, so what usually we do is red and blue. Okay, the other thing we can do, this is from a game I worked on like years ago, early in my career, and we had the left one. Okay, and it was like this huge thing on screen. It's about like if this is a screen, it was like that big, and players as soon as they saw it, what would you do if you were a player? Imagine you're a player, just started the game, you've got no weapons, you see this thing, what do you do? Run, shoot it. You've no weapons. Run. Why run?
Because it's red and scary.
Literally. So we trained everyone. Big red thing is scary, and we wanted players to interact with this thing. Okay, so it was like a mechanism that was supposed to be interacted with. We wanted players to go up to it. There was only one path going up to it, and you couldn't like there was some like offshoots to like get small loot and stuff, but you couldn't really deviate away from it. What happened was players went up. They like saw this bit. They saw this much, and they went nope, all the way back down, and they kept trying to find a way out. There was no way out. They thought it was a puzzle that needed to be solved. Sorry, do you have a question? Oh, sorry, it's just pencil. How did we solve it? Literally just shifted it to blue, light blue. That's the only change we made. Light blue change, no problem at all. On like hundreds of tests, no one had an issue. Walked straight up. Oh, what's this cool thing? It's blue and light, and blue usually means good and peaceful and happy, especially this light blue. So it mustn't be angry. No other change. It was literally just if you look at it, everything else is the same. It's just that glow that should be shifted red to blue. So you got to be careful about that as well. Certain colors have been used like not only in games but in the real world. Like red is always danger most of the time in real world. So it's generally something to be avoided. So there's loads of little like bits of pre-training that you need to be aware of. This is a cheat sheet. There's a few things here. Like again, these are all like super stereotypical, and there's a reason they're super stereotypical because they've like it's a visual language that's been built over the ages. So like I disagree with some of this stuff. Like pink is feminine. I like pink, but there are things that can be used to code for certain things. All right, so this cheat sheet does help a little bit if you want to be, again, we're beginners, we're trying to learn the visual language of color. That's Peloton that I just listed. There's a link directly there to go to there. There's a few others as well. This is Canva. That's also free. This one is very cool. So colormind.io. Let's have a look at it. Oops, sorry. IO. It is supposedly AI. I don't know what AI is working on it. But what it does is it generates color schemes for you. So it will, if I generate, it will give me like a color palette randomly. And there's a bunch of stuff that I can look at here. Like you can get a MapleStory color palette. I think you can upload images as well. Yeah, you can. Image upload. And if you image upload like a scene that looks like something that you want to give, it'll give you a palette based on what it thinks that scene is built off. Does that make sense? So like, yeah. Colormind.io.
What was the previous one?
Peloton. Wait. This one. Peletton. They are in the slides as well. Again, if I forget, please ping me on Discord, and I'll put them up. Okay. So yeah, there's a few other things. Again, this is less of a problem these days than it used to be. It used to be quite bad, like even 10 years ago, where specific colors or like visual kind of like cues could mean very different things in different cultures. Like that example there is like where white's usually used for weddings in Western culture, but it can mean like it has a correlation to like death because it's used for like rebirth and purity in other cultures. So again, depending on the culture, there may be some like differentiation in what a specific color means. It does seem like red is almost universal for danger, so that which makes sense, I guess. Blood or whatever. So that's small stuff that you need to pay attention to. Again, as the world becomes more globalized, this is less and less of a problem. So what we are going to do is for today we're just going to practice. But for the end of the entire module, what you're going to build for me is a level, right? I think I talked about that before. What we're going to do for that level is we're going to figure out what world that level's set in, what's in that level, what character should live and fit in that level, your main character, what assets are going to be there, and what kind of animations they'll have. That'll be all the way at the end. For today, we're going to try and figure out how to like grab an art style that we want to do, and we'll break it down. How much time do we have? 20 minutes. Oh dear. I'm going to skip all of this. We're going to go fast. Okay, so we're basically like, this is pixel art, very lo-fi pixel art. If you specifically want to emulate old school pixel art, they'll often have this thing called a bit limit. So literally there's only certain kind of colors you can use. 16-bit, if anyone knows, I've ever heard of that, 16-bit, 32-bit, that literally means 16 colors. You can pick 16 colors, that's it. And that's a style if you want to choose it. If there's no bit depth limit, this is no limit. This is like any color you want, but it's lo-fi, so no depth pixel art. There's no bit limit in this. This is a game called Owlboy, and it's like pixely arty, but it's like very very high resolution almost. We kind of have a mixture. This is lo-fi pixel art with high res effects. This is an Irish game, actually, Dark Side Detective. So it's pixel art, but if you see the glow effects, these are soft. They don't have a pixel edge in them, so they're using a mix of the two to kind of like get the effect that they're looking at. Shovel Knight is specifically 8-bit, so only 8 colors. If you look at any specific level in Shovel Knight, it should only have 8 colors. I think there's a couple of levels where they break that, but most of the time it only has that like limitation, 8-bit limitation. This is 16-bit, and you can see that like with 16-bit, you don't get 16 colors. Sorry, you get like 8 by 8. It's confusing. You get a lot more colors. And then we got like flat with like color grading on this. So this is like flat, solid. It's not completely solid. There's gradients to it. You can see there's like soft gradient here. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, for your level and for today, find something that you want to emulate. And we're trying to figure out how they got it to look the way it does, and then we're going to try to emulate that, because by copying is one of the best ways of doing it and getting better at doing our own thing. This is Skullgirls. It's comic book kind of like outline. You can see that characters are, it's a very common thing. Characters are outlined, but backgrounds are not outlined. They're just painted. They don't, like, if you see there's actually a character in the background standing in a doorway. It's kind of fuzzy over here, but it's not what you call it outlined. So anything that's important is outlined. Anything that's not is not outlined. And again, this is one of the examples where you can use black because it's an outline. Snipper clips is, so they have like paper textures, and we can, you remember the overlay that we did in Photoshop? When we did like overlay is often used to have textures applied to something as well. So you can like literally take a photo of a paper and have like that paper texture, set it to overlay mode, and it'll give the texture to whatever's below it as well in digital paint. This is a game called Nine in the Woods. This is like solid vector art, so it's like no shading, everything's just solid. There's some transparency, but everything's just solid shapes. It also has a shape language. We haven't really talked about shape language today. We've just talked about color language, but shape language, where if you see like every character has a round head. They're all like round heads with things coming off them, and they're all like simple shapes, if that makes sense. They're all like squares or triangles, or like circles. And we'll talk about that later as well. There's a shape language that can be applied. Circle, square, and triangle usually are the shape language. If you notice as well, the NPCs are generally, their heads are circle, like almost perfect spheres, and the main character is more of a oval. And it's like a deliberate choice to make it stand out a bit more, so you know it's the main character, which is the cat, if you didn't realize. That we're going to try to do, I'm going to try and do something like this today, which is a tiled kind of like a sort of hand painted thing. I'll do that in Photoshop. I'll be only using a mouse just to show you that you can do it with just a mouse. You don't have to have graphics up, even though it's easier. The thing to note with this as well is that we have tiles, right? So these things, you see the way they're unit blocks. Let's look at specifically this one to this one. They're exactly the same image next to each other, and that's a tile. So a tile is something that's seamless. Literally, if you have a tile bathroom, look at it. It like has tiles, and the pattern continues. It's a really good way of optimizing your game. Again, these days we don't really need like tile limitations. In the old days, you had to fit on like a cartridge, or you had to fit on a CD, so you had this space limitation. Nowadays, it's more stylistic choice, and also for production. So if I can tile something, it just makes it easier from a production perspective. I don't have to draw an entire level. I just need to draw a background piece, and I can tile that background piece quite well. Maybe make one or two variations. I'll show you how to do that today. We'll look at tiling today. And then we have like high fidelity painting and stuff like that's. If you want to try, go for that, do. But if you're a beginner, don't. Cool. So whatever you're looking at, these are like kind of the questions. I'll post this up straight away, and just like whatever style you're trying to emulate for today, try and break it down. Try and look at them, trying to reverse engineer what they did. We're going to be doing a background today, and we're just going to try and see if we can get anywhere close to what they're doing. Okay. There's a whole bunch of extra stuff I'm not going to go over, but there's like technical stuff if you want to do pixel art, or if you want to do like direct painting. There's like some tips and tricks here that are helpful. You can read that on your own time. Okay. Any questions? We good? All right. So I'm going to drop to Photoshop. I have 15 minutes. I don't know if I can do this in 15 minutes. Give me a background really quick, please. Give me like an area. What? Let's so like a forest, and I'll put a waterfall in it. Okay. What? Okay. Let me do like a leafy, foresty background. Okay. I'm gonna try to speed run this. Okay. So remember we were talking about resolution before. So resolution, the bigger the resolution, the more detail I can have in it. But also, the bigger the resolution, the bigger I can scale it in Engine. So if I do it more. So let's say I have a tile that is huge. That's like 2048. That's really big by 2048. So this tile might be my background tile. They're massive, and they're seamless. So if I pan the camera, it might look. It looks like it's it's like the same seamless rolling texture. So hopefully a player doesn't notice that. And if I have a smaller tile, that smaller tile might be like 128 by 128, for example. And that way that will be smaller, but this can also still be used as a tile. So it might be, I might be using it as platforms. I might be using it as a foreground tile. A bunch of like 128s. And again, when the player's looking, they don't, hopefully, if we've done it right, they don't notice that these are tiles. Does this make sense? Yeah? Okay, so what I'm trying to do today, I won't have time to do both of them. I'm going to try to do the background, and then I want you to not only do the background for next week, but also do a tile, a small tile. Okay, so are we sure this makes sense? Because otherwise... So essentially I'm doing a large background. I might do, yeah, I'll do two, should I do 2048? I'll do 2048 by 2048. There's no rule on like what the resolution is. It really depends on your game. So like those examples that I showed you, if you have a really high res game, you probably need a much more high res background tile. If you have a very low res game, then the opposite applies. So it just depends on the stylistic kind of like thing you're going for. Okay, so that's me. First thing I'm going to do is look at forest game background and see if there's something that I can use as a reference. I'm going to go for like a very loose style, but what I might try and do is something like this, where it is like a bunch of trees, just hidden, like very, very faded trees in the background, and maybe some like treetops on the top. Okay, I'm not gonna worry. Will I worry about the ground? We'll see. We'll see. So we can kind of look at this. It's kind of like bluey greens and like a little bit of yellow in there. Let's have a look at Peloton. Let's go something like this, maybe. Maybe I want to shift this more towards. Oh, shift. I need custom. So shift this more here. Okay, so I get like a color palette. What I can do with this, copy, and I can just paste that directly. Oh dear. Paste that directly, and this can be here, just sitting there, on its own layer. I can even lock this layer so it doesn't move, but I can just leave it there. And that way, every time I hit Alt, and if I'm in brush mode, if I hit Alt, or if I press I, that gives me the eyedropper too, and that I can just like grab colors from it. Does that make sense? So I can like change a color. So it's just there as like almost, if you think of an artist with like a stylist in their painting and they can go and change colors. It's kind of what I'm doing with this. Again, if you want to go complex, you can like blend them and merge them. But for now, let's go simple. In general, what I want to do is start from darker colors and go up lighter. Almost always, it's easier. Again, there's different rules. 10 minutes. Let's go quick. I'm gonna pick like maybe a dark blue. And what I'm going to first do, fill the whole thing, Alt Delete. And then for brush, you can get brushes in Photoshop. There's the basic brushes here, but I have this like concept art brush pack. If you search free concept art brush pack, you'll find them. You can just download them, and if you double click the AVR, it's an AVR file, it just installs into Photoshop, and it gives you a bunch of different brushes. So if you can kind of see, let me grab this one, make a different color. It gives me like a more interesting shape, I guess, than what I have. Okay, so what I'm going to do is start with dark, and I'm going to be like, okay, light's coming in from the top. If the light's coming from the top, I'm going to pick an angle. I'm going to pick like top right. So ideally everything should get lighter towards the top. I'm going to work with a lower opacity here as well. You can also have pressure sensitivity if you have a tablet, but I'm going to work with just my mouse and a lower opacity. And you can kind of see I'm blending it in, and the texture of the chalk or whatever helps it quite a bit. I'm sorry if this is quite loud. We are trying to speak up. Okay, so I'm just getting a very, very quick just color. Oh, and I need this to tile. So view pattern preview. There's this thing called view pattern preview that allows me to show it repeating, and it allows me to tile it as well. I should have done this from the start. Let me restart. So I'll show you what that does. If pattern preview is on, when I paint, it kind of like it crosses over. If that makes sense. So I'm able to like do this and it'll tile. Okay, so let's do like some light shining through, because you know the way like in my there's like light shining through the middle areas. So let's do that as well. Oops, that's too hard. Nope, don't with the brush. Do a soft one. Okay, and I might darken it back down again. Okay, so I'm just doing like blobs. It's just a complete blob in the background. That's really quickly. I'm going to draw a tree. Just creating the shape for now. And I will also try, if I'm saying my light's coming from my top right, oops, I'm going to try, where's my color swatch? Shift color, light's coming from here, so I'm going to try and get it to light. So it's catching light from the right, if that makes sense? I'll add details later, but for now I just want this to look okay. And then if I want, I can zoom in and add small like and blend that in with a dark brush. So you can always kind of blend back in. Once you make something, you can blend it back in with a darker color, so it looks like it matches a bit more. I would spend a lot more time on this. Okay, let's say I have that. My layers, and I'm going to drop the opacity of this so it blurs in a bit more. And that actually works pretty well. And all I need to do is, oops, sorry, this is on its own separate layer. So from the auto select, I can copy paste that. And Control T. If I hold Shift, I can like warp it. I can also do things like actually warp. There's warp here, so I can bend it so it looks like a different tree, even though I'm basing off the original one. Again, I rotate that. And this one, I'll flip this. Transform, flip horizontal. Where is flip horizontal? Oops, sorry. Edit, transform, flip horizontal. Again, scale that down, maybe. And I'm gonna change the opacity, so some of them are more opaque. So again, that makes it look like it's like having different distances. And I can pull it over. You see the way when I push it over here, it starts coming back on the right hand side, because pattern preview will tell it for me automatically. So let's add a bit more. And then behind all of them, I can try to put a bit of brightness, so it looks like there's some light shining through. It's very low opacity. And then that's that tree cover. I think I literally have a brush for leaves here somewhere. Maybe, if not, I'll use this one. these at the top. I'm going to use my use a marquee tool. This is there, M. Use a square one and select this area. This means I can't paint outside of there. So I want to block that off. So because I don't want to paint over it, it shows up at the bottom. Wish I had more time. And I can blend in the bottom colors by erasing them and generally dropping the entire class the whole thing. Okay, so for 3 minutes, I think I'm not doing too bad. But you can get like actual leaf textures as well, like leaf brushes. Sorry, that when you brush it, literally just like puts leaves in it. I don't like this. I don't like this at all. I'll redo that. But let's say I have this finish. When I save this, I'll save as a PNG, and that will be a tile that I can just use in my game, and hopefully it should look like this in the background of my game. Right, so it should look. Again, if you zoom into this, it's actually not too bad, because it only took me 5 minutes. I would like to put a bit more work into this, but hopefully that kind of makes sense. Is that okay? Yep. All right, so let me stop recording. We have our